So, with that introduction, Harold, which is quite impressive,
Thank you.
I guess my first question for you, it seems like you came right into prison work with this idea that culture was something that was really important and that it led to lasting change. Where did you get that idea? Like, where did that germinate in your background?
Well, being a student of sociology and psychology, I always knew that the environment from my college days, that the environment determines to a large extent the degree to which you're going to be successful. And so that the culture is going to determine the degree to which any leader, any organization is going to be able to achieve its goals. And so I have always had an interest in the climate, the environment, the culture of either a small work unit or the entire organization. Because in a small work unit, which I control for the earlier part of my career, as being as a warden and deputy warden and so forth, you're not responsible for the entire thing, but the small units that you can control, if you can cause a healthy culture to exist within those units, your unit is going to get better results, be more successful. And it applies to the entire organization as a whole. So that's something I picked up very early on from my days in college and my early experiences.
Yeah, I would think being a counselor would have helped that. I mean, that was one of your first roles, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And that's not a usual role, I wouldn't think, for someone in your position, right? Coming from starting out as a counselor.
Well, I think today you're seeing more of that, but earlier on in corrections, mostly individuals who began in the ranks, in the custodial ranks, were the ones who would ascend to become wardens and ultimately directors of systems. But I think that's changing across the United States today as well.
Interesting. Nancy, did you have a question?
Yeah, and what I was noticing as I read much of what you've written and others have written about your work is this idea that you're continually changing and learning what's happening within the system, so that it feels to me like you sort of implement something and then you discover there's something else and then you discover there's something else. Would you just talk a little bit about your journey in terms of from sort of where you started to now, in terms of what this idea of sort of learning your way into what's happened?
Well, I will tell you that I really enjoyed my ascent when from my entry-level position as a counselor up to becoming a warden, because while I had a lot of responsibility as I moved up the ladder, I was not the ultimate entity responsible for really anything, because a warden in a prison will ultimately be that person that's responsible. So I had a lot of opportunities to explore and to try things and so forth. But when I became a warden, it dawned upon me that I had arrived, so to speak, and my idea as to exactly how things were to play out was not coming to fruition. So I realized earlier then that I needed to do something to really cause people to gel more so than I've done before. And all of the training that I'd had in leadership and so forth, which all seems to come together, same message, different authors extensively. While it was useful and beneficial, it wasn't really causing that major environmental shift that I was looking for. And so I became a student as a warden, and I actually went to the National Institute of Corrections, and over a 3-year period, I bet you I took every class that they offered in leadership. So much so that they made me an adjunct instructor at the academy after a while. And so I did that for many years. And after becoming director, I was, again, still thirsty and striving to learn as much as I could, looking for something that will help me impact the entire culture of the organization. And that's when I was led by the Academy, the National Institute of Corrections, to the concept of a vision search or a vision quest I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
Future search.
they got me involved with some folks who were quite versed at facilitating Vision Quest. And so I invited them into Nebraska when I was a young director. And we had our first Vision Quest together, which is sort of a dialogic approach to setting the vision, working with stakeholders and so forth. And so we did that. That worked very well, but that thirst still continued on. And I kept on looking for something that got me to the point of ultimately meeting Peter Garrett and Dr. Isaacs and Mr. Jones from Canada and others down in Texas who were actively facilitating training and dialogue.
Right, because the future search is a one-time experience, which is really quite dialogical, but it's only one time, right? So you probably felt that. And so you were looking for something that would be more going on in terms of everyday life, right? Which led you to dialogue.
Yeah, you're correct. The Vision Quest or the Future Search, as they go back and forth, they use those terms interchangeably, but it's a one-time experience, and it only involves a relatively small number of individuals. For example, they go with 70 to 100 people, and those are folks that are internal to your organization, folks that are external, all the stakeholders. And so it's not really touching that many people within the organization, but it's actually carrying out a very important function for the organization in terms of setting goals and vision and so forth and strategic approaches. But it's not involving the folks within the organization to a large extent, and we're not hearing those people's voices. And that's what I thought was missing. And that's what I was in search of.
Is it from that you came up with the healing environment idea, or was that before the future?
No, actually I came up with the idea of the healing environment at a Future Search conference. The first one we held in Nebraska. So that concept has been with me for many, many years now, because that was like in the mid-1990s when we started talking about healing environment. And it was the result of an exercise that we were doing in which we were to envision an environment that was so constructive and positive that you could be successful in achieving your goals and getting everybody involved. And so I started thinking about that, and that's where the concept of the healing environment came to me. And a funny story, I recall a warden, a young lady, I was a warden, a former Marine, lieutenant from one of the facilities in Nebraska, was in my group. And when I shared the idea of a healing environment, she looked at me kind of like, the director has gone crazy. You forgot that we're working in a prison system. That's what was accepted initially, but we did not stop. We kept on working it and pushing it, and it's gotten to the point where it is today.
Yeah.
And will you say what it means to you, Harold? I mean, I don't mean a definition exactly, but what does it mean to you, this healing environment?
Well, the healing environment is one in which, and the healing is for everyone involved in the environment. It's not healing for the inmates, it's healing for inmates, it's healing for staff and everyone who has to operate within that environment. And it gives you a chance to be the best that you can be, have your shortcomings addressed by your colleagues respectfully and responsibly, helping you to be whole, and then being better prepared to contribute to whatever it is that you're working on collectively. And so it's an environment in which you're safe to fail and be supported. It's an environment in which your voice matters. It's an environment in which you're also going to be held to account, and again, respectfully and responsibly.
Yeah, that's very nice. That's a lovely, I like the term, but when you talk about it, it really comes to life. So thank you. That's very good.
I noticed you handed out Bill Isaac's books to all of your practitioners. Were you able to actually take Bill Isaac's whole LCI class?
Yes, I did. It seemed like it was several years, but I think it was probably only about a year and a half or so we were involved in that class. But I was fortunate while I was in Nebraska, serving as a director, again, still searching for a way to get more voices in the room, get more people engaged, get more people to buy in. A colleague in Nebraska, a fellow agency head, had some connections with the Royal Dutch Shell Corporation, and so got me an invitation to go to Woodlands, Texas, where the Royal Dutch Shell Corporation was inviting a number of its members, its leaders from around the world, to come to study a subject matter. That subject matter happened to be, on that occasion, dialogue. So I got an invitation to go down to Woodlands, Texas, and to spend a week with executives from all over the world from the Royal Dutch Shell Corporation studying dialogue. And that's where I met the famous Peter Garrett. Peter Garrett, Bill Isaacs, and Mr. Jones were the three proctors that week for that session. And I was so intrigued with what was going on. By day 2, I was on the telephone calling back to the folks in Nebraska, telling them we have to seek out ways to make this organization a dialogic organization. And we have to somehow figure out how we're going to get other people trained and involved in dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's where it all started.
Yeah. I have been to the Woodlands many times, Harold, and it's such a lovely environment, as well as they do really good work there. But
yeah, it's very serene. If I recall, it sits in the middle of a PGA golf course.
Yes. Yeah. But it has lovely trees and running water, and it's really quite a nice atmosphere in which to think rather deeply. Yeah.
Exactly.
And as you started,
a good place for learning.
Yeah, it was learning. That's right. And you do sometimes need space in which to do learning, don't you? You need
exactly.
Yeah. So as I was reading about how dialogue moved within your organization, it seems like, you would, and I'm not doing this in sequence, but it seemed like you would teach one idea, and then you decide, no, now we need learning teams, and now we need these working dialogues. And so it seems even at that, will you just talk about that sequence and how that sort of emerged, and maybe it's continuing to emerge, I suppose.
Yes, it is continuing to emerge. And so let me take you back to Nebraska and the first experiences we had there. And so in Nebraska, after I got back from Woodlands, Texas, we sought out to find dialogue training. We got some folks out of California that came and did a session with us. But we kept on looking, and I decided, why not go back to Peter Garrett? Because I learned that Peter Garrett was doing dialogue in the prisons in England. So I figured that would be a good fit. So we chose to reach out to Peter Garrett and bring him to Nebraska. So we did that, and so Peter came to Nebraska, and that's where our relationship really began. And so in Nebraska, we set out primarily to train the executive staff. So the directors, the executive team, and then wardens all had a chance to be trained. And so most of the wardens were sent to York Harbor, Maine, where they were able to study dialogue with Bill Isaacs and others. And so we also trained some facilitators as well, and but we did not really go deep down into the organization. We pretty much stayed at that level, but it was also very well received. So as I left Nebraska after serving there as director for 15 years, I left there to go on to Washington State. And in Washington State, we decided to take it a little deeper. So we trained the executive team and so forth, the wardens, but then we trained individuals who would become skilled practitioners capable of training others, trying to build a bench, so to speak, and create some sustainability. I left Washington State and went to Massachusetts and pretty much did the same thing that we did in Washington State. But then in Virginia, we decided to take it to a much deeper level. Virginia is the largest of the 4 departments of corrections that I ran, And so we decided it was going to take a greater investment, a different type of thinking perhaps, to really reach everybody within the organization. So we set out to, again, begin with the executive team, because I believe that unless you have the buy-in from the leadership, it's an uphill battle.
Right.
And so we began with the executive team. We got their buy-in first, and we got them trained. Once the executive team was trained, and I have a very large executive team, there are 28 individuals on the director's executive team. And once they were all trained, then we began to cascade down throughout the organization. And in Washington State, I mentioned we trained about 6 people who were skilled to then train others. In Virginia, what we have done is train about 265
That's amazing.
individuals who are now, yeah, and they're strategically positioned across the system, which allows access to all of our prisons, all of our probation and parole districts. They can always reach out to get in touch with a dialogue practitioner, either for training or facilitation or in some type of intervention. But you're correct in that we are evolving in a number of ways, because now that everyone is trained on the skills of dialogue and the practices and the actions, now we have to put that to work. And we have a lot of needs, like every organization have a lot of needs, things that need to be occurring, and we're also interested in ongoing learning. So we have come up with a concept of learning teams, and using dialogic skills, the learning teams go to work in small units to learn. Everybody in the organization, all approximately 13,000 staff members, belong to a learning team.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, they come together at least once a month to include the director. And I don't run my learning team. Others run the learning team. I'm a member of that learning team.
That was one question so your dialogue practitioners, the 200 plus people, are they full-time dialogue practitioners? I mean, that is what they do. They're not responsible for other functions?
No, they have other responsibilities as well. They are correctional officers, they are counselors, they are unit heads, they fulfill a number of different roles within the department.
But they'll be the ones that will actually do the facilitation, or they'll lead up the learning teams.
Yes. No, the people in the learning teams, you do not have to be a dialogue practitioner to run a learning team. There are others who are also heading learning teams that are not dialogue practitioners. But the dialogue practitioners and subject matter experts are available to coach and to assist, to help people develop that are then capable of running those learning teams.
Yeah. So finish your, so you were going through the steps, because I wanted you to get to the working dialogues, which I found particularly interesting.
Well, we have done a number of things, and again, the learning teams is just one of them. And I look at learning teams as a tool that can be used for a variety of reasons. For example, if a policy, a new controversial policy is being put out there, the director can request that all the learning teams throughout the agency address that policy. We want to have a common learning, common understanding of that issue. And then information can come back from the learning teams all the way back up to the executive team. So information is not just flowing one way, it goes both ways. And you can use learning teams again to address any issue. For example, we talked about the healing environment. So if there's an issue impacting a particular unit that needs addressing, needs healing, so to speak, to allow that unit to be more effective, then the learning team can be used to address those issues as well. So again, the learning teams, as well as the offender resettlement journey, as well as the work and dialogues, they all have one thing in common, and that is they're all using the dialogic skills as they are engaging in those different initiatives. So you're interested in the working dialogues.
Yeah.
Well, again, like in every organization, you want to, you have to be addressing issues. Some issues are things that require study and solving and so forth. Others are just issues in which you are just thinking about the future and planning. Well, the working dialogue is designed to one, identify an issue that needs to be addressed, defining that issue, and then getting the right people in the room to address that issue. And once you have the right people in the room to address that issue, then you start thinking in terms of, okay, what's the current state, where we want to be, and then what it's going to take to get there. And so that group of individuals work through those stages. There are gates that we set up and so forth. And you have to have certain understandings and so before you can move on. And so the most important thing is understanding, first of all, clearly understanding the issue at hand. Secondly, getting the right people to address the issue. Defining the state that you want to be at. And then deciding how you're going to get there.
Harold, will the working teams come together several times? I think I'm trying to get at the accountability. In other words, what drives the accountability from the first time a working group might come up with a solution to a problem, for instance?
No, a working dialogue, again, can be commissioned by any unit head, anyone really that has any authority to raise an issue and to address an issue. They may then enlist subject matter experts like the dialogue practitioners and others to assist them as well. And they are not ongoing working teams. They come together to address an issue.
Right.
And once that issue is addressed, then they're disbanded. And that issue may take a day, and it may take weeks.
Okay.
Of
They'll
meetings
stay
and
together
so forth.
until it's actually resolved.
Yeah, but they're issue specific, and they're not working teams that have been assembled that remain intact forever and ever.
Right. So you have learning teams that are probably more within.
Well, I'm thinking working dialogues. Yeah.
So I noticed in reading through the paper that you did have some resistance. It seemed to come mainly from middle management. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just how you worked through that? And
yeah, well, I think, and I encountered that every place we have been, all 4 states that we have gone to, people are skeptical, and I think largely it's change. It is change that people often are pushing back against. And I found out, I've come to realize that even though people may not like the conditions that they're experiencing currently, when you introduce change, it's something new. And often people don't want something new. They like what they're accustomed to, even though they don't really like it. They feel good about what they're accustomed to.
right.
And so I'm not surprised when I encounter some resistance to change. I think what's most important is that you allow people to voice, and then you practice those skills to enlist them,
Right.
and you have to model the things that you expect. And I think through modeling, through creating environments that are safe, you get people then to buy into what you're doing. Consistency, I've found to be key as well. So the old adage about do as I say and but not as I do, that doesn't work too well.
Yeah.
Because you're always being watched. So I expect the resistance, and I'm not concerned too much with it. Quite frankly, I've never been. I just make sure that we have a clear path, and we stay on that path, and we allow people to voice. Practicing basically the 4-player model, Cantor's 4-player model. About voicing and listening and respect and so forth, and bystanding, following. We do all of those things. And I think if you're doing those things, you're doing them consistently, people will come to realize that you're trustworthy. And they'll go along with you. So I think it's a combination of, again, modeling the things that you expect others to be doing, as well as teaching.
Right.
We have to teach.
One thing I'm sure those of us outside the prison system must wonder is it easier, do you feel, to introduce something like dialogue organizationally wide in a command and control environment? Or, I mean, why in the prison system? I kept asking myself that. Maybe it's easier because it definitely is a very specific kind of culture.
Well, I suspect that the prison system, like any other organization out there, large organization, you're going to have some of the same dynamics that you have to deal with.
Sure.
Because people are going to do what their bosses want. I don't care if it's a command and control system or not. If you have a boss who controls your fate, then you're most inclined to go along and do what that boss wants. And so I'm not sure that the type of system really makes that big of a difference. But again, I've only worked my entire career of now 4 to 6 years in correctional environments. But what we have done largely is we have tried to flatten that curve. And so a lot of the things that we do today in the Virginia DOC, you will not see happening in other correctional agencies across the country. And you will not see those things happening either in non-correctional agencies. For example, the director staff meeting, when I got to Virginia, there were 6 members that were considered, six people considered executive staff. When I got here, people across the agency were telling me that they didn't know what was going on because communication wasn't flowing well, and those 6 people were not communicating effectively. So one of the first things we did is I expanded that to 28 individuals. Wow. So now every department has somebody at that table every Monday at our staff meeting, and they help to set the agenda, not the director populating the agenda. So you see, we have flattened that pyramid.
I see.
And we have welcome voices. And we also not only have the 28 members there, but guests are also invited. So a correctional officer, a counselor, a unit manager, anyone can request to participate. And the only thing my executive assistant does is try to manage the numbers. If the numbers fit and the room is big enough, then come on in. So I only share that to say that we have tried to address our culture in a number of different ways. But for everything that we have done, the principles and the practices and the actions of dialogue have really assisted us in being able to realize those things and to do those things, from the work and dialogue approach to the learning teams, to even getting people to buy into the concept of the healing environment. Now, the director did not define the healing environment. The director shared a mental construct of the healing environment with a large group of individuals. And then about 30 individuals from different disciplines within the agency came together. We created a healing environment council, and they came up with a definition that everybody likes and everybody can support, and that everybody can buy into. And so you see, we have done things differently in many respects, but everything that we've attempted to do has been made easier by applying the practices, and the principles, and the actions of dialogue.
Love it.
Yeah, I like what you've just said a lot, that it is the involvement of others that really is the key to, and through dialogue. As you know, we the U.S. Academy invited Pamela and Rick White to speak to our small group of U.S. members, and we heard there that there was that they were beginning to work with offenders with dialogue, as well as with the staff, and although that the virus interrupted that to some extent, would you talk about your intent around offenders themselves in terms of dialogue?
Sure. I will tell you that from day one, I think Peter Garrett wanted me to include inmates in dialogue training. But I pushed back at Peter because I felt that it would not have worked as well if we did so, because my belief is that staff would resist even stronger if you were doing something for inmates that they had not yet received.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, and I've seen that played out in different settings in corrections across the country. And so I always felt that it was first best to get staff involved and the executive staff. And once they were involved, they bought into the concept, then you're able to move it down throughout the organization. And so we are to the point now in the Virginia DOC of saturation. The staff's gotten, and a lot of inmates, by just observing and watching staff, they have also gotten it and have benefited from it as well, even though we had not, at that point when they're beginning to get it, we had not started working with them directly yet. But now we are working deliberately with them in several of our institutions, wherein they are actually teaching the concepts and principles, and offenders are beginning to use it. We expect to see that now continue to expand. We have 46 institutions, and we're expecting to see that expand now throughout all of our institutions. And the offenders, for example, I mentioned earlier, we have therapeutic communities, or we call them in Virginia, cognitive communities. Well, in those cognitive communities that are often run by offenders as well, think of the benefit to introducing the dialogue skills and practices in those communities with the offenders. They could really take advantage of it. And but I've had the privilege of going to a facility and actually sitting down and watching the offenders practice dialogue. And I was very much impressed. And so I am with Peter now, that I think we're to the point that we are saturated enough and prepared to have the offenders now join the staff in that journey.
Yeah, I think that it is so thrills me, the possibility that the offenders could pick up those skills and then take them back as they leave the system into their own lives. I just think that's a wonderful move that you're making now. So I really applaud that, and hope that it continues and works as you want it to. And it's just talking about that, and then I want to turn it back to Linda, but I'm also recognizing that you are honored for the recidivism rate that has lowered, and talk a little bit about that and how you think that came about. I'm sure you think it came about through dialogue, but I'd like to hear you say it.
Well, I think a lot of things have contributed to our rate of recidivism, beginning with the staff. The staff understand our mission, our vision, and our purpose. And again, dialogue helped to communicate that, the staff. But no, the staff understands it, the staff has bought in, so that's made it very easy for us. But I think we are successful in recidivism because, one, you remember what I said earlier about our culture. A culture is going to determine the degree to which you're successful. And so using dialogue to help to change our culture, to help to communicate more effectively with staff and so forth, we're then able to do a lot of things that we could not do otherwise. And we evaluate the things that we're doing to see if the culture is shifting and changing. And we are fortunate that for the last 4 years, the Virginia Department of Corrections has had the lowest rate of recidivism in the country. Currently, we are at, our last measure was at 23.1%. And the average in the United States is right about 42%.
Yes.
And the outlier is right at the state that's doing the worst, is at 63%. And that is individuals returning back to prison within 3 years of discharge. And so we are doing very well, but I think we are doing well because our culture allows that to occur. Our culture facilitates that, and the culture is set, is the way it is largely because of the influence that, or the support that dialogue has contributed to all of that.
I would think that other prison systems would just be knocking at your door like crazy now. Are you giving tours and talks, and how have you been able to bring in other systems?
Well, I personally have spoken several times at all directors meetings and so forth, and we have spoken about the dialogue and the things that we're doing. But I'll tell you that unfortunately, correctional organizations are usually large and challenging organizations, and on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot on the plate of the director. And a lot of people see something like dialogue as something extra that they have to do. And they're focused on the issue of the day. And unfortunately, that doesn't allow you to think differently and to try to grow and to expand. And so I have shared this with colleagues, as mentioned, and the reception has been good. But to make that commitment, a number of them have found it difficult to make that commitment. Only after a couple of them have had some issues, some major problems, and they wanted to figure out how to address it, have they come back and said, let's talk about this dialogue thing. And how can this really help? What can we do with it? But unfortunately, there's so much going on right now in our industry that this is viewed as something added that they have to be concerned with. And you see, dialogue requires a commitment from leadership.
It does.
A commitment not only of time, but a commitment of resources as well. And some states are not in a position to make the commitment of resources. And time is very, very precious. And I think those are perhaps the two biggest impediments. If folks had, that is folks being directors of corrections, if they had all the resources they wanted, and if they had, the time to really sit down and strategize and think about, culture and so forth, then I think you'll have a lot more people buying in. But unfortunately, the climates do not allow for that right now.
So in your experience then in the prisons that you worked with, the governors were all very receptive, it sounds like, or was it varied?
Well, let me tell you a little secret. I did not ask any of my governors for permission.
Okay, you just did it.
I have worked now for 8 governors, 3 in Virginia, and 3 in Nebraska, 1 in Washington, and 1 in Massachusetts. And I've not asked any of them for permission because they hired me to run the system. They hired me to make a difference. And so I set out to do that. And I don't keep it a secret from them, but I did not go and seek permission. I just decided that the culture of the organization is my responsibility. And through dialogue and other practices, I can impact and improve that culture. The outcomes of reentry and so forth is my responsibility. And so we're going to do what we need to do to cause those outcomes. So I don't feel the need to go back to the governor to ask for anything. Now, if I needed additional resources for it, then yes, I'll go back and make a request of the governor. But what I have done in the states that I've worked is that I've repurposed resources. I didn't ask for any new resources. I repurposed resources to put towards dialogue and so forth.
Yes, yes. And that was the basis for my question, if your practitioners did other things. So it sounds like you took functional people and simply gave them the training and made them experts in dialogue. So that's how you brought it in. You didn't have to hire other people. Yeah. Nice.
We're almost out of time, Harold, before we break people into groups. But there's one question I really want to ask you. And I hear in your work a group of underlying principles, and I kind of wrote them down. And I want to just say some of them to you, because the question I want to ask you about them is that what in your life or background led you to hold principles like this? So let me just mention a couple of them. I probably don't have all of them. Certainly the healing environment idea, that incarceration is to keep the public safe. while offenders are learning how to be good citizens, that people, whatever they've done, should be treated with dignity and respect, that all voices deserve to be heard. So what is it in your life, in your background, led you to hold these principles so deeply that they've lived out now in your work?
Well, it begins with my upbringing. My father was a minister, and he raised 9 children. And I am one of the only ones that's not ordained, but all of my siblings, my youngest sister, for example, Norma, is the head of the nursing surgical unit at a hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she's also an ordained minister. My brother Carlos was a commander in the Navy. He ran nuclear submarines, but he's also an ordained minister. My brother Edwin was a major in the Marine Corps, and he's also an ordained minister. 2 of my sisters are also married to ordained ministers. You can see the ministry has influenced our lives. And so that's something that our parents gave to us about caring about individuals, about seeing the best in people. But then when I went to work in corrections as a counselor, it hit me right in my face that 60% of the individuals locked up were young men that looked just like me, in a state in which only 4% are Black in the general population, but in the prison system, 60% look like me, young Black men. And so I realized that those individuals were there largely because of opportunities and other things, or lack of, that got them in those positions. There are people who wanted to do good. There are people who wanted a better lease on life. So why not hear their voices? Why not come to understand their challenges and their trials? And then once you learn about them and understand them, you can do better by them. And if you do better by them, you do better by society as well. And so it was that realization, and I never thought of that before I entered the department as a counselor. But to see all of these Black faces around me had caused me to stop and to think. And then when I reflected back on what was happening in the community to me as well, I could have easily been one of those individuals. Because I have been pulled over for robbery, which I did not participate in. I've been pulled over and accused of stealing my own car. And depending on how I reacted in those situations, could have landed me where those young men were in prison. So I'm just one of the fortunate ones. So I believe that's important to not only hear the voices of those Black individuals, because there are others as well that have similar experiences and stories. And so I think as a people, we ought to be able to come together and to better serve each other. And so the concept of the healing environment is aimed at doing just that, not giving anybody a free pass. Nobody gets a free ticket. We're going to hold you accountable, and within the concept, it speaks about accountability. But also, first and foremost, we're going to set out to help you. We're going to set out to help you heal. And as I said earlier, the concept of healing is not something just specific for the inmates, it's also for staff. Because as staff comes to work every day, staff presents with baggage. And that baggage may be such that it causes them to run counter to our purpose, counter to our mission, counter to our vision, not affording those opportunities that these young people, I thought, deserved. And so that's what framed my thought as I entered into and then evolved within the correctional environment. I think second chances, we speak about second chances for inmates. Well, I think we should be talking about second chances for staff as well. And to help
it's a very moving statement, Harold. Thank you for expressing that for us. I think it's something we all need to hear over and over. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Let me make one last comment to you. if I may make one last comment,
Please.
and it's about the recidivism rate and about the culture.
Sure.
We measure everything that we do. And beginning in 2012, we got a grant from Urban Institute to come in and do a baseline study, and then do an all agency culture anonymous of all of our staff. A number of things are looked at. The healing environment, dialogue, all those things are on the questionnaire and the survey. But I just want to raise one point. One of the questions is if we should lock people up and throw the key away. Well, the first survey, the response was in double digits of
Yes.
people, of staff saying lock him up and throw the key away. The last survey, 6.4%
Wow.
said
Yeah.
lock him up and
Amazing.
throw the key away. So
That is
that tells me that we're having an impact on the
Yeah.
culture of the organization, and that largely is what allows us to be successful with reentry. Of course, also with the support of the governors and the legislature in giving us resources to put towards those objectives.
Oh, thank you for telling us that. That's a wonderful, wonderful statistic. It's a 6.4%. Yes,
Yeah.
that's way down from over 60%. That's wonderful. Really shows the power of dialogue. Well, let me turn it over to Linda. Put us into groups and tell us what we're going to do.
Well, I was just going to say, that's your ministry. You know, you've really
Yeah.
proven your ministry work. So, right.
That's what I tell my brothers and sisters.
I love it. It's a great story. I just, Laura Mae Brown simply wrote, Director Clarke is greatly appreciated in our organization, the Virginia Department of Corrections. We're proud to have him represent us today in this event. I just wanted to read that. Okay, let's see, there was one here. Yes, I was wondering this myself. Obviously, COVID has been affecting so many of us, all of us. What are, I'm not sure who asked this, the host, is this Jane or Peter? What are the advantages and disadvantages you are finding of having to work online rather than face-to-face in prisons and in the community? I'm assuming that's because of COVID.
I think that was Peter.
Okay. So Harold?
You're right, but Harold doesn't seem, oh, there he is.
Where is Harold?
You moved, Harold.
There he is, okay. I couldn't find you. All our pictures are so small.
No, obviously, COVID has impacted the DOC like it has every other agency out there on operation in the community. And that caused us to really stop a lot of the things that we were doing and to change the way in which we're doing business. But of course, in the institutions, they are 24/7. And so they have to keep on operating, but with some limitations, with some restrictions in terms of movement and so forth. What COVID has done for us, however, is helped us to realize that one, we can take more advantage of technology because now we are using Zoom and we're using Google Meets and other means of communicating electronically. My staff meetings, for example, now every Monday is by Google's Meet. And so people are participating, some in the building, but most of the folks are at home on off-site and that are participating in those staff meetings. And so it makes it easier, I think, for a lot of folks to participate in those meetings. Similarly, there are other meetings that are going on as well using Google Meets or learning teams that I mentioned earlier. Before, the learning teams all came together and now the learning teams are meeting again now, starting back up with Google Meet. And so technology is really, to some degree, facilitating a communication. However, we're still working through some things. We put together what I called a new normal task force a couple months or so ago to take a look at pretty much everything that we do in corrections. And that task force was given the latitude to make suggestions, recommendations about how we resume activities. And again, the task force new normal was named purposefully as it is, because we did not assume that we're going to go back necessarily to the way we were doing business. There's going to be a new normal established in many respects. And so we now have the report from the task force, and we are working through many aspects of that. Some things have already resumed. We are running some pilots right now, as recommended by the task force in certain facilities and so forth. But it's a different day, it's a different time, all because of COVID.
Yeah.
Just to add a comment, I was thinking, Harold, I asked that question. I was talking with some of your dialogue practitioners in the small group. They were saying people were keen to get the learning teams running or are already running. I was thinking that it opens the possibility of learning teams being made up of people from different facilities.
Oh, yes.
So you could actually be talking for some period of time with people in prisons in other parts of the state or in communities in other parts, and learn some practices from each other, which could,
Exactly.
but there are a surprising number of opportunities come up when you change the medium, aren't there?
Yeah, for example, Peter, my learning team has already been meeting. We started meeting now about a month and a half ago, and we are all in different places. Most people are home, working from home. And so if they're working from home and involved in a learning team, they could be in any facility, any institution, anywhere in the system, and participating.
That's great. Sharon Lavoie, could you unmute yourself and ask Harold the question you had around getting ahead of the issue? I know you've asked 2 questions, but I was particularly interested in that one around getting ahead of the issue.
Okay, which question? Give me the starter, because I asked 2 of them.
Yeah, you said rather than prisons, working with the communities and the police.
Yes. So Harold, obviously your story about being stopped is not, sadly, is not uncommon. One thing I was wondering is again, planning your future out. Have you thought about entertained any ideas of trying to get ahead of the situation instead of when folks are imprisoned, getting ahead of it and working with communities and with police to figure out ways to stop some of this from happening? Because I think you've got such a profound presence, and I think you've obviously changed some minds in terms of this. So I guess I'm just thinking about expanding your influence.
Well, right now, at least in one facility that we have a situation where now law enforcement is coming in and dialoguing with the inmates before discharge, and that's going on right now. We need to expand that on a much larger scale, but that's taking place today. I think also we talked about future search earlier. That's also a means by which we can get law enforcement involved. For example, we have held now in the DOC, I think we have had 3 future search meetings so far in Virginia. And at all of those future search meetings, we have had sheriffs, we have had Commonwealth attorneys or prosecutors as known in other places. We have had chiefs of police. We have had representatives from the governor's cabinet. We have had legislators, correctional officers, counselors, folks from throughout the department. And so those are also very good mediums for in which we can have those kinds of conversations as well. Because as we in the future search is thinking about and planning for our future, it's also impacting all of the stakeholders that are also in those meetings as well, thinking about how their organization engages and responds in achieving our common goals and objectives.
And is it right, Harold, most of the people in your care are not in prison?
That's
most
right.
haven't ever gone into prison. So you have a huge beforehand service you're providing, in fact.
Yeah, the majority of those that we're responsible for are individuals that are being supervised in the community. I mentioned earlier we have 46 prisons. We also have 43 distinct probation and parole districts. And today we have approximately 68,000 individuals under supervision in the community, while we have about an average of about 30,000 individuals incarcerated. That 30,000 number now is down to about 27,000, largely because of COVID, and the courts have not been sending anyone to us. So that number has gone down, which was at 30,000 for several years, now to about 27,000.
Andy Gibson, I'm not sure where you are. So many people here. Would you be willing to ask your question to Harold about middle management?
Yeah, Director Clarke, one thing that we discussed, I picked up that you mentioned a lot of the resistance always stems from middle management. That's something within learning teams and our dialogic practitioner meetings we had kind of surmised on our own. It seems, you know, if someone believes in it and is invested in it and getting their people involved, or even something as simple as attending learning teams, and they make that happen. But if that middle manager isn't quite as invested and doesn't put forth the effort, there doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability for that individual. Again, not just speaking on my behalf, but a lot of the concerns and discouragement from colleagues over the years. Could you speak to anything that's being done to possibly improve that situation?
Well, first of all, I think it's not just middle management that may pose a pushback or a challenge. I think you can find that pretty much anywhere throughout the organization. And I think there are a lot of individuals who are senior individuals that just don't want the bother because they're on their way out the door. They don't want the bother. They're getting ready for retirement and so forth. So it's not just pointing the finger at middle management. But I think we have a tool and we have a process of coaching individuals. And I think we need to employ that more than we probably have been. When you see someone responsible not carrying out that responsibility in a safe environment, in a healing environment, you can also coach up. It's up to individuals to just get that professional courage to coach up and to dialogically say what you perceive, what you sense in a safe environment. And that's the beauty of dialogue. You can have those type of conversations. But I think sometimes people don't have the necessary courage to do that and don't feel prepared. But that's what's required, because at any given place and time in a system this large, you're going to find individuals who want to push back for a variety of personal reasons. And so when that occurs, you cannot allow that to remain in place. We each have a responsibility, I believe, to be accountable and to take action. One of the things that I say to new supervisors, I speak to new supervisors every month that are promoted within the department. And one of the things that I say to them is that now you're a supervisor, you must realize that to be effective and to be able to carry out the vision and the mission of the organization, that you have to be in the arena. And being in the arena means identifying what you see that is not consistent with what's expected, and then expecting something to occur as a result. But you can't just maintain a status quo. So it's everybody's duty, it's everybody's responsibility, especially individuals who have enlisted to become supervisors of the organization. If we don't identify those individuals, if they're not held to account, then the shift that we desire in the culture is not going to be lasting.
Thank you, Harold. Patrick Connolly, you had a question around the resettlement journey. Could you unmute yourself and ask that question?
Yeah, so Director Clarke, I was just, when in the breakout groups, we were talking about how, you know, I've been involved in dialogue in the Department of Corrections for a little bit over 3 years, and everyone talks about how awesome the resettlement journey is, and I've never gotten to see one, so I just wanted to, I was wondering if it was going to be going on at the conference and then also if that's going to become something that's more available to staff in the future, because I think it'd be super beneficial for everybody.
No, Patrick, next on my screen, right next to you, is Whitney Barton, who is the person that we have identified to shepherd dialogue throughout the agency. And Whitney, if she could just open up that window between the two of your screens and tell you what we've been talking about, she'll respond to that directly. I'll tell you because I know technology-wise she can't do that. But I will tell you that I totally agree with you. I think that the resettlement journey is a learning opportunity for a lot of people observing that journey. And we need to be doing more of it. So I've been talking with Whitney and with Chief of Operations David Robinson to figure out how we can cause those journeys to be playing out more frequently, because I think opportunities are being missed when we only do a reduced number of those. So expect more of that.
And Harold, we didn't really talk
you-
about that in the interview, so maybe take a minute and explain what the resettlement journey is for those that don't know about it.
Oh, sure. Well, again, dialogue provides a tremendous learning opportunity, and we apply it to everything that we think needs to be done in the system to get us results. We use those skills, and so the offender resettlement journey is a process that we use to, again, developed by some staff along with Peter Garrett and Jane and others. We bring back individuals who have discharged from a system. We call them returning citizens. And so the inmates will come back with their families often and others. And we have a collective of staff involved in the room. And we have the individual literally walk along a continuum from the point of incarceration when they came into the system, and they talk about their experience in this at that point in the system, and they talk about how they felt, what they experienced. They talk about where they felt the staff failed them. They talk about where they felt the staff did great and did what things we keep and don't keep and so forth. And they talk about things for staff to think about and to learn about how decisions made and so forth impacted the offender we're working with. They move from that point of intake and classification then into an institution. And they talk about that process of going to the facility, what they experience, and then what happened within that facility as well. They talk about moving from that point. They go on into maybe a reentry unit, all the way to the point of discharge, what happens when they go into probation and parole. So at every phase of their transition through the system, you can set up like a gate and have the responsible people for those areas present. And the offender is walking along a continuum and informing all of the staff about their experiences that they gathered in the department, where they think staff did well, where they think staff could have done better, just to help us engage in some introspection, do some learning, and improve our system. Now, we can actually begin that earlier, and we have done at least one case of that where we actually began at the point of sentencing, and we had a judge there that was involved in the sentencing process, and the offender or the returning citizen can talk about the sentencing process, how it impacted them, and so forth, and how they walk through the system. So you can really add to that continuum any point, any gate, so to speak, of importance or significance that had an impact on the life of that returning citizen. And you have the right people there that can hear what they're saying, that can learn from it, and that can make a change in the system.
Nice, very nice.
Can I just butt in a minute there? Patrick, there will be a session about the offender resettlement journey at the conference. I think Whitney and Bobby have been putting something in the chat. The challenge that I'll be working with Peter on is how we bring the process that Harold's just described, how do we bring that to life on Zoom like this? So you'll find out, if you come to the conference and come to the session, you'll find out how we do it.
Nice, Jane, thank you. Lakita Sykes, would you like to unmute and ask your question about the community corrections clients?
Hi, Director Clarke and all. My question was just pretty much if we had any examples of how we can get the community corrections involved. So I work in probation and parole, and so I was just wondering, how can we get clients involved in process groups? And I have a background in reentry, so I know that there were process groups going on within the facilities, but maybe not so much within the community unless it's through decision points or other groups like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a number of different groups, as you know, that meet within the community. And again, dialogue applies to all of them. The skills and the practices and so forth can be used in all of those groups. But when you speak of process groups, specifically, what are you speaking about?
You're on.
Okay, particularly with reentry, if we knew that there were some areas within the state that had process groups with just almost like what you were explaining with the offender resettlement journey, with just how to get through, how to navigate life again.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps we can speak some more, because I'm not clear on all of the details that you're seeking. So perhaps we can speak offline and address that to get you some more details, because I don't have a good mental construct as to what you're interested in. But suffice it to say that at your fingertips, you know, are all the services that are provided. So if you can think of a way to address that need that you're identifying, pick up that telephone and call somebody who you want to bounce an idea off of, and who you want to discuss it with, to see how we can perhaps create something that doesn't exist right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could just add there that the offender resettlement journey that's describing walk along the continuum, that continuum is in the community as well.
Yeah, yes it is.
So you can gather not only those in your own agency, but those in other agencies, police, hospitals, and gather them in a room and look at the journey of real people from their point of view.
Yeah.
Because everyone that fails is on your recidivism rate. Every journey that succeeds brings it down. So how do they really work these journeys is the question. And you can take the offender resettlement journey into the community with others, and you have re-entry councils and so on, and really look at it and learn a lot. So,
yeah. And we have included the community in offender resettlement journeys, but we have not really taken it all the way into the community. We've just taken it to the point of being discharged in probation and parole and how they're received and so forth. But actually we can go beyond that, even further into the community using that same approach.
Could I publicize another session I'll be running at the conference?
So, commercial.
Yay, it's my commercial break. Sorry, and here's my dog. I'll be doing a session on something called a paper, and then a session on something called threshold dialogue, where we were running dialogue sessions right into the community. So in kind of just post-release kind of re-entry phase, but also in kind of residential areas. So when the offenders were really getting more independent, but still needed a dialogue process to support them, we had a dialogue running there too. So if you make it, Lakita, to the conference, come to my session on threshold dialogue. Thank you.
We have time for one more question, Harold, and then we need, we'll open that up for people to do their checkout, which Linda will lead. But the Bobby, who doesn't usually get to ask a question, had a nice question. You want to ask your question, Bobby, around the benefit to society?
Yeah, sure. So I was wondering, outside of corrections, where in the world do you think needs dialogue most, where it'd be most beneficial to society?
Wow, I think the place that needs dialogue most is in the chambers where policies are being made. Legislatures, Congress, that's where dialogue is needed. And I will tell you, interestingly, a few years ago, I was traveling to the southwestern part of the state. Specifically, I was going to Red Onion State Prison, and I took the Secretary of Public Safety and 3 legislators with me. And while we were at the prison, we walked into a class wherein a sergeant was doing a session on dialogue, teaching dialogue to officers and others in the room. And so we stood in the back of the room, the legislators and I and the Secretary of Public Safety stood in the back of the room and watched them for about 10 to 15 minutes. And as we exited the room, one of the legislators turned to me and said, "How can we get that to the legislature?" He said, "We need that." And I just looked at him, I said, "Give us a call, we can help you figure it out." He hasn't called yet.
That's lovely. All right, Linda, do you want to?
Are we going to ask Lauren to talk a little bit about next
Oh,
month?
you're right. Oh, thank you so much for reminding me. Yes, for sure. Lauren is going to be our speaker on October 16th, and we wanted her to say just a few words to let us know what she'll be talking about that. So, Lauren?
Yeah, okay. Thanks so much. This is going to be a tough act to follow. Dr. Clarke, I wrote a little note in the chat that I hope APD ordains you soon, because I know we've all been blessed. I mean, incredibly. Thank you so much. I'm a philosopher, so a little bit of a different turn. And I wrote a book, Overcoming Polarization in the Public Square, on civic dialogue. And my aim is really to counter a tendency in political philosophy to privilege rational argumentation and persuasion. It's typically done if you think about deliberative democracy. But I believe that this book has wider resonances, not just for the academics. So I hope that many of you might tune in. And my book really looks at several components of dialogue. First of all, the philosophical and conceptual roots of dialogue, really digging in to use concepts to explain why dialogue works. I mean, we all here know it's effective, but some of us like to go a little bit deeper and think about why. Why does it work? Secondly, I also take a look at some of the contemporary empirical research, specifically neurocognition, that looks at cognitive biases. And I argue that dialogue, as opposed to rational persuasion and argumentation, actually is a much more effective way to address some of these cognitive biases, like implicit bias, et cetera, that often surface in our really important conversations. And then thirdly, I argue that dialogue can function to cultivate civic virtues like openness and open-mindedness. And so there really is a relevance, again, as we all know, for dialogue as opposed to debate and argumentative persuasion. So yeah, I look forward to seeing, I'm sure not you all, that would be great, but yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Lauren.
We just have a very few minutes left, about 12 minutes, and we'd like to give anybody who feels so called, so moved, a little bit of time to just reflect and say your reflection to the group about this time we've spent together. Any ahas, anything you'd like to say to Harold, anything you particularly liked or didn't like about our session today. So I can see most of you on the screen, so if you just raise your hand, I'll call on you. We'll just do it popcorn style. And if you're on another screen and I don't see you, you can always use your little hand, what do you call it, icon. And how you get there is you go down to participants. Probably most of you know that, and you can put your hand up. Okay, who would like to give a reflection back to the group? So just raise your hand. June. You'll have to unmute.
Thank you, Linda. I just wanted to take a moment, Harold, to tell you that I'd like to personally thank you for expressing your appreciation of the works that we're doing in Virginia and for your commitment to make and take the responsibility to make it all possible for us. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you. Who else would like to give us a reflection?
Lloyd has his hand up, I think. Maybe none.
Lloyd, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just unmuting. Harold, thanks so much for coming and sharing what you did today. It's so rarely that we hear hopeful reports from our public institutions these days, and particularly something associated with the criminal justice system. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing and for sharing that with us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Sharon Lavoie?
I'd like to say thank you, Harold, because I believe that you're restoring everybody's humanity around this topic. Building consciences, teaching people mutual respect, which is the only way we'll change society. And thank you so much for your hard work in this. I can't imagine how many times you swim upstream, but thank you for staying on the job, and that Godspeed. I will pray for you every day that you continue to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And by the way, I've had a brother who's been incarcerated, so I get it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Peter Hill.
Thank you. Just say, Harold, I appreciate your talk and the stories. There's an edge to your dialogue work which is unusual. A lot of people have what I'd call a soft and fuzzy edge to their dialogue. You clearly have an edge of accountability.
Yeah.
And accountability means standing up for what you believe, ensuring your values work where you are. That's unusual. And without that, you can have some great examples, but you can't shift the whole system. There are people who don't know, who are conservative, don't understand, don't want to move. And you have to have this element of accountability if you want to go systemically. So I appreciate you holding that, but holding it with real patience.
Thank you.
You enable everybody to come on board, but you hold the accountability strongly. I think it's a great tribute to you. Thank you.
Peter, I don't know if you're still there. I did see your hand was up. If you'd like to make a comment. But I'll take anyone. He may have gone.
I think he keeps dropping in and out. His internet, I think, isn't very stable.
James Sasha?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment to Mr. Clarke about, I'm on the, like I mentioned in the group, I'm on the old heads, been around a long time. Not as many years as you, Mr. Clarke. But, life in the Department of Corrections, at least in Virginia, has totally changed since Mr. Clarke has come aboard. And you know what? I feel safer going to work today. And that's hard to say that. And I know a lot of states don't have that privilege, I guess. But I really appreciate it. And just by doing things like he's doing today, that's why we're #1 right there. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Lovely things. Yeah. It's hard to.
Tom O'Connor has his hand up.
Thank you.
Harold, I was struck by the number of times you said dialogue. I mean, you talked about a lot of different things, but you kept coming back to dialogue. And I think it's very simple, that 4-player model that you were talking about, how often you came back to that. And then the other thing that I found incredibly helpful was this dialectical approach. You've got one approach about all the black faces, and just overcoming that injustice and that whole thing. So you were writing that and then replacing it with good. So that was really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. And if I may say something, I come back to dialogue often because, as I say to staff all the time, I see dialogue as a vessel into which we can place all of our challenges, thoughts, etc., and make sense of them and be able to communicate them to others effectively. So I think of dialogue as that vessel that provides the skills and the tools to get that accomplished.
Venus, do you want to speak? You need to, yeah.
Yes. Yes, I really appreciate the opportunity to hear more of your vision today, Director Clarke. I'm a probation officer in Southwest Virginia, and was greatly inspired by your testimony, by the compassion to kind of get more of the story about where this all began was wonderful. And I'm proud, more proud than ever to be a part of this organization. I just wanted to thank you for sharing your vision of dialogue, and just let you know, not only has it changed the way that I work with my coworkers, with the folks that I supervise, but also just learning dialogue skills has changed the way that I associate with my family. I'm a small business owner. It's helping to change my community. I mean, you know, the seeds that you're planting are making great ripples throughout the state in various ways. Just wanted to say thank you, and I really enjoyed the session today.
Thank you very much.
Jenny and Carrie both have their hands raised.
Thank you. Jenny?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Director Clarke because I've been around corrections for about 25 years, and I've embraced all of the initiatives that Director Clarke has brought to the Department of Corrections. And I have grown professionally buying into those initiatives, and it's made me a better clinician and a better colleague working with others. And I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate the work that I'm doing, and I feel that it's helping the returning citizens that I'm working with. And I just want to let you know that some of the old heads, we do get it.
Great. That's great.
Very much.
Who was the other one who had their hand up?
That was Harry.
Yes.
Harry.
I want to say thank you for a couple of things. Number one, having this meeting today, it gave us a refreshing opportunity to have a dialogue amongst one another again, especially since of Corona and not being able to kind of figure it out, the ins and outs of having communication with social distancing. So I thank you for that. The second part I would like to say is that having dialogue in the department has changed how people communicate with one another, how they handle situations, and having a vision of incorporating dialogue with offenders has been helpful as well, because once offenders understand that you're listening to them and you're giving them the opportunity to voice or being a participant in our dialogues, especially when seeing it come to fruition with the female facilities, the gender responsivity, listening to them being able to participate and giving us their concerns. It was eye-opening, and I'm glad to be a part of that. And I am appreciative for dialogue being incorporated in the department, because I see a change. I too have been in the department for a long period of time, where you were kind of like how the old saying was, children are to be seen but not heard. So thank you, Mr. Clarke, for that. Thank you for the dialogue practitioners that work in the department. I know that it's not an easy task always being asked to do multiple things, but I thank you all for having the opportunity. And I thank you, Mr. Clarke, for having the vision to see it come to fruition after many years of struggling and probably pulling teeth and eyelashes and eyebrows.
Thank you.
There's a lot of other thank yous on the chat. Any other last minute? Oh, I don't see your name. I'm sorry. QXA9, if you want to unmute. You're still muted. No, you're still muted. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes. Hello, this is Sergio Escobar from Blanc Correctional Center. How is everyone? Hope everyone is good. I just want to thank everyone for bringing the hope again into the dialogue, because COVID-19 has been, well, it has affected pretty much everyone, not bland, knock on wood, but it's funny how being a dialogue practitioner has opened so many doors within the institution. It's amazing that we have become not just safe dialogue practitioners, but ambassadors of a safe container. People have come to me with things that they don't want everybody to know. So, of course, as a safe container, you're able to gather the information and pass it on to whoever it needs to be passed on. I do enjoy working with everyone. I enjoy most of these people I already know, and they probably know me. But thank you very much, Mr. Clarke, for giving us the opportunity to make our place a better place to work.
Thank you
Right.
so much.
I think if we all want to take off our mutes and we want to maybe give Harold a little clap at time when it's about. We thank you so much, Harold. This has just been a wonderful, wonderful time to get to know you and the work you've done, and to meet some of the people that are actually doing the work. And I'm going to be very interested to hear more at the conference. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your presence, and we hope that we'll see you next month when we have Lauren as our speaker. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye, all.